unfortunately, Nico can't join us today, so I will do my best to cover a couple of things, but it is a lot cut down from what we're planning on doing. So what I'm really just going to talk about is what you currently have to report in accounts, in the trustees report around sustainability, and that's essentially the streamlined energy carbon reporting requirements. So I'll talk about that, but also some potential changes that are potentially coming with this. So currently, excuse me, at the moment, the SECR reporting only applies to large academy trusts. So that's any trust that meets 2 or more of those criteria in 2 consecutive years. And the important thing here is to remember that this is at a group level. So any trusts that also have subsidiary companies, trading subsidiaries, other subsidiaries, it's at a group level. It's not just the individual trust level. So the criteria: income, balance sheet, and employees, as it's stated there. So any 2 of those 2 consecutive years, then you are caught. So I shouldn't use that term, but caught by these requirements. If you're therefore caught, sets out there what has to be disclosed in the trustees report, and it has to include those areas, the energy consumption, and then broken down into your scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. Obviously, the key ones are the scope 1 2 emissions. Now, I know a lot of you will use, through your energy contracts, energy sort of consultants, advisors. So I know for a lot of our clients that they produce the SECR reporting information for you. But I also know some trusts you obviously do sort of pull that together yourselves. So obviously a key one there as well is the scope 3 emissions. Now at the moment, all that you have to report on in there is obviously business travel in rental cars or employee-owned vehicles where it's come on Academy Trust business. And I'll come on to talk about the potential changes which are around those scope 3 emissions. And then there's an intensity ratio and disclosing what methodology you're using. So, I mean, hopefully for those of you that are having to do this, there's nothing there that's sort of a surprise. Just out of interest, I mean, how many, for those of you are currently having to do it, how many of you are sort of pulling all of that data together yourselves? Okay, yeah. How's that go?
Challenging.
Yeah, exactly. There are some exemptions available. Even though you might be large trust, there are some exemptions, which is where your total energy consumption is below 40,000 kilowatt hours. You still have to disclose that that's the case, but that's an exemption. Or the other, which is this kind of comply or explain exemption, is where you decide that it's seriously prejudicial to your trust's interests, or it's impractical to obtain the information. If you're going to go down that route, you have to state that that's what you're doing and state the reasons why. Now, I think the Financial Reporting Council's view is that the seriously prejudicial is going to be pretty rare, if ever. I can't really think where it would probably apply in the academy sector. Maybe some other sort of corporate organisations. Yeah, there's could be some sensitive competitive information. Or impractical to obtain, so that could come down to your actual systems processes for collecting and collating that data. So that's currently, I think when this only has to be disclosed in the trustees report, so we don't audit it, it's not something we audit, but we do review the trustees report, our audit report. We do have to look at the trustees report, and essentially we're saying that there's nothing in that trustees report that A, is inconsistent with the accounts or doesn't comply with legislation or requirements. So we do look at the SECR, A, to see that it's got the relevant figures. We don't do work, we don't have to do work to tie back the information, audit the information, but we do just look at it and see, well, does it kind of make sense? And it does often highlight some issues. Just thinking back to some last year, that suddenly the intensity ratio has dropped dramatically, or it's increased dramatically. And when you sort of look at it and think, well, hang on, pupil numbers are the same. What's different? And often, sometimes that's highlighted that there is an error in the underlying information, whether that's being produced yourselves or externally. So I think, all my sort of message would be, even if you've produced it yourself or procured it externally, just do that sense check of it. Does it actually make sense? Does it make sense with what you know of the trust and what's happened in the year? In terms of, there is a good practice guide. ESFA have got a good practice guide on SACR reporting. It's actually pretty good. It's good. It takes you through all the requirements. So I would, if you're moving into that territory for the first time, I would recommend looking at that. In terms of some future changes, now this is where I start to step outside my comfort zone on sustainability, but I'll do my best. As Nico tells me, they're expected to be announced sometime this year, and it's really around the scope 3. So it's going to, a lot of scope 3 reporting is currently just encouraged. So it's going to have more scope 3 reporting. There's going to be mandatory verification around some of that reporting. There's going to be mandatory use of the GHG protocol as well, and just more emphasis around setting and meeting targets. So it is going to potentially ramp up a bit more. And I think with the scope 3 emissions, it's probably the thing to start thinking about. How are your systems? Because if you're using a energy consultant, this is probably an area they're not really going to be able to help you on. It's down to your systems and processes to collect that information about your scope 3 emissions. And the legislation talks about upstream and downstream. For Academy Trust, it's mostly upstream activities. So it is going to be important about, with the wider remit of scope 3 emissions, having those systems, understanding what data you're going to have to collect, what you may have to mandatorily report on, and how you're going to actually collect and be able to report on that data. And actually, when you look at it, it's one of the areas where actually it's potentially the largest proportion. When you're thinking of your employee travel, school trips, things like that. Accommodation you're staying in, the travelling on those trips, particularly for international trips. There's potentially a lot of emissions that need to be captured there. So something to look out for. With the work that Nico and her team do, because we've got our sustainability teams, they do a lot of work with some of our clients, not really in the education sector, but corporate sector at the moment. What they've found around the scope 3 is actually, once you do start looking at that, it does actually identify some opportunities for things like cost savings, because you are really looking at how are we spending our money on those sorts of activities, and it really has opened some doors and ideas and opportunities around where cost savings can be achieved, and we've done that ourselves as an organisation. It also helps in obviously getting ready for that sort of net zero target, particularly with DFE sort of strategy and announcements around that. Could give access to better finance deals, and now that from 1st September you'll be able to enter into finance leases, it might be something that potentially produces cost savings. And also future-proofing compliance, and also just protecting the trust from reputational risk. Again, just as there's more and more focus on this area, again, it might be something prospective parents, I don't know, but people looking at other schools, trusts are just going to be looking at, well, what is your approach here, and what are your measures and your intensity ratios? So again, not meeting that, it could present some sort of reputational risk. That was really all I kind of had the knowledge to cover at this stage. Post-event, Nico, there will be a more detailed communication that Nico's putting together, So post-event, you will get a lot more detail of other areas that Nico was going to talk about. But hopefully that has just been a little bit helpful today.